The town of Ashford had been built around a river that never seemed to rest. Its water carried the memories of old wars, wagon trails, and the hands of men who had dug gold out of the hills. To most people, it was just another small American town, white church steeple, a diner on the corner, kids throwing pebbles into the current. But for Thomas Avery, the river was where his life had ended and begun all at once. Years ago, Thomas had been a proud young man with big plans. He wanted land of his own, a family, and the kind of name that carried weight in the county courthouse. But his hunger for more had made him careless. One summer night, drunk on ambition, he gambled away the last of his savings in a backroom card game. By the time the sun rose, his pockets were empty, and so was the trust of the people who had once believed in him. The town didn't forgive quickly. Farmers crossed the street to avoid him. The banker wouldn't look him in the eye. And even the preacher's words grew colder when Thomas sat in the back pew. His fiancée, Eleanor, had waited as long as she could before handing back the ring and whispering, "I cannot build a life on broken ground." So Thomas walked away. Not out of pride, but out of shame. He built himself a shack by the river on land no one wanted. He lived with little more than a fishing pole, a worn Bible, and the memory of every mistake he had made. The years turned his hair grey, but his heart stayed restless. Then, one autumn morning, something changed. He was out casting his line when he heard footsteps on the bank. A boy no older than 10 stood there, ragged shirt, skinny arms, and a look in his eyes that reminded Thomas of himself long ago, hungry, lost, and already too familiar with disappointment. "Sir," the boy said, voice shaking but brave, "do you know if the river carries things back? I lost something in it yesterday." Thomas frowned. "What did you lose?" The boy hesitated. "Hope," he said quietly. Those words pierced deeper than any knife. Thomas laid down his fishing pole, staring at the boy as if time had folded. He didn't know the child's story yet, but he knew one thing for certain, for the first time in years. The river had carried something toward him instead of away. And deep inside, he felt a stirring he thought he had buried forever. The boy did not speak at first. He stood there at the edge of the water, his bare feet, sinking into the damp soil, his hands clenched into fists as if holding something back. The older man, Samuel, watched him quietly. In all his years by the river he had seen strangers pass through, farmhands, travelers, children chasing after stray dogs, but this boy was different. He carried silence like a heavy coat. Finally Samuel set his fishing pole aside and spoke, his voice steady and calm. "The river listens, boy, sometimes better than people you want to tell it something." The boy's eyes shifted to the water. His lips parted but no words came. His face was streaked with dirt, his jaw tight with anger or maybe fear. When his voice finally broke the silence, it was fragile. "They don't want me, not my mother, not my father, nobody." Samuel's chest tightened. He had heard stories of loss before, but this was different. The boy's words carried no drama, no begging, only truth stripped bare. It was the same ache Samuel once knew when his own father left for the war and never came back. The nights were long, then the days heavier still. He understood the emptiness that came from feeling unwanted. "You know," Samuel said quietly, picking up a stone and tossing it into the river, "sometimes family ain't the ones who raise you. Sometimes they're the ones you find along the way." The boy lifted his head, his guarded eyes flickering with something close to hope. For the first time his shoulders loosened just a little. He whispered, "Then maybe I ain't got to be alone." The sun slipped lower, casting streaks of orange and red across the river. The sound of water filled the silence between them, and Samuel felt something shift. His quiet days of solitude were ending. In the boy's presence he saw not just loneliness but a beginning, a chance to give what had once been taken from him. That evening Samuel walked the boy back to his small wooden cabin that stood a short distance from the river bank. The cabin was old but sturdy, with smoke curling from its stone chimney and the scent of pine lingering in the air. Samuel pushed the door open and motioned for the boy to step inside. It was warm in there, lit only by the glow of a single lantern hanging from a beam. The boy hesitated at the threshold, his eyes scanning the room, the wooden table, the stack of books in the corner, the single chair by the fire. He looked like someone expecting to be told to leave at any moment. Samuel noticed and spoke gently. "You can sit, boy, no one here to chase you out." The boy stepped inside slowly, almost like it was a trap. He sat stiffly in the chair near the fire, his hands folded tight on his lap. Samuel poured him a cup of warm broth from the pot, simmering on the stove, and slid it toward him. "Eat," he said, "it'll settle your bones." The boy picked it up with both hands, drinking in small gulps as if afraid it might be taken away. Watching him, Samuel realized how young he truly was, no more than 12, maybe 13. Yet his eyes carried years beyond his age. After a long silence, Samuel asked, "What do they call you?" The boy lowered the cup and answered barely above a whisper, "Eli." Samuel nodded. The name settled into the room, heavy and sure. "Well, Eli, this place ain't much, but it'll keep you warm if you need it." The boy glanced up, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. He had expected rejection, maybe even anger, but instead he was being offered shelter. For the first time, a faint trace of relief passed across his face, though he quickly hid it by finishing the last sip of broth. That night, Samuel laid out a spare blanket near the fire, and Eli curled up without another word. The old man sat in his chair, long after the boy had fallen asleep, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft sound of steady breathing. As he stared at the shadows dancing on the cabin walls, Samuel felt something stir inside him, a memory of what it meant to be needed, and a quiet fear of what tomorrow might bring. The morning light slipped through the cracks in the cabin walls, painting thin golden lines across the floor. Samuel woke early, as always, the habit of an old man who lived by the river and seasons. But today he was not alone. Eli was still curled under the blanket, his hair a tangle, his face softened in sleep. For a moment Samuel just watched him, thinking how rare it must have been for the boy to sleep without fear. Something in that thought stirred Samuel's chest, a mixture of sadness and resolve. By the time Eli woke, Samuel was already outside splitting wood. The boy stepped out barefoot, blinking against the light. He looked unsure, as though he wasn't certain if he was still welcome. "Grab a piece of kindling," Samuel said without looking up. Eli hesitated, then bent down and picked up a log. His thin arms strained under the weight, but he carried it anyway. Samuel hid his smile. There was strength in the boy hidden under all that silence. They spent the morning working side by side, chopping wood, carrying water, mending the small fence by the garden. Eli said little, but his eyes followed Samuel, learning with every motion. Just before noon, Samuel noticed movement along the path leading to the river. Two men walked slowly, their clothes worn, their faces rough with travel. They looked like drifters, men who carried trouble the way others carried sacks of grain. The boy stiffened the moment he saw them, his small body tensing as if bracing for a blow. Samuel laid a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Stay close," he murmured. The men stopped a few yards away, one of them grinning with broken teeth. "Didn't know you took in strays, old man," he said, his voice sharp. Samuel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had seen men like these before, desperate men who sniffed out weakness. The taller one nodded toward Eli. "That boy got family somewhere? Looks like the kind we could use for chores." Eli's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. He shifted closer to Samuel, his fists clenched. Samuel's voice, when it came, was calm but firm. "The boy's with me. You'll move along now." The air grew heavy. For a moment it seemed the men might argue, push their luck. But something in Samuel's steady gaze made them think twice. Muttering curses, they turned back toward the path, their figures shrinking against the line of trees. Eli let out a shaky breath. His voice broke in a whisper. "They would have taken me." Samuel placed a rough hand on his shoulder. "Not while I'm here, boy. Not while I'm here." The boy swallowed hard, and for the first time there was a small spark of trust in his eyes. That night when the fire burned low, Samuel knew that this child had already bound himself to his life like the river that never stopped flowing. The days grew longer and softer in rhythm. Eli and Samuel falling into a quiet pattern of life. They worked in the garden, fetched water from the river, and sometimes sat on the porch watching the sky fold itself into night. But one evening, as the crickets began to sing, Samuel noticed Eli staring at the fire, his small face drawn tight. "You're quiet tonight," Samuel said. Though he knew the boy was often quiet, this silence felt heavier. Eli's lips trembled. Finally he spoke in a low voice. I keep hearing their voices. My father yelling, my mother saying she wished I'd never been born. It doesn't stop even here. Maybe I really don't belong anywhere." Samuel felt the ache of those words like stones against his chest. He leaned forward, his voice steady. "You listen to me, boy. The things they said, those words don't decide who you are. People can fail you, they can turn their backs, but that don't mean you're less. It means they're blind to what you're worth." Eli's eyes filled with tears, but he did not look away. What if they were right? He whispered, "What if I am nothing?" Samuel's jaw tightened. He reached down into the fire's glow and picked up a stick of charred wood. He pressed it gently into Eli's hand. "See this? Burnt black, broken down. But you put it in soil and life grows around it. The ground takes it and makes it part of something new. That's you, boy. You ain't nothing. You're the start of something." Eli stared at the stick in his palm as if it were a secret only he could see. His tears slipped down, but there was a shift in him. A faint light breaking through the dark. The night stretched quiet again, yet this time it was a gentler silence. For the first time, Samuel saw Eli's shoulders ease and his head rest lightly against the arm of the old rocking chair, not as a burden but as a child daring to feel safe. And in that moment, Samuel understood he had not only taken the boy in, he had been given something to the chance to heal an old wound of his own. The weeks turned into months. Eli's voice grew stronger, his steps firmer. Where once he had been a shadow drifting on the edge of despair, now he began to laugh at small things, like a rabbit darting through the garden or Samuel's crooked hat slipping over his eyes. One afternoon Samuel took him to the town market. The townsfolk watched with curious eyes the old fisherman walking beside a boy who clearly did not belong to him. Some whispered, some frowned, but Samuel's hand rested steady on Eli's shoulder, and that was enough. By evening Eli asked quietly, "Do they wonder why I am with you?" Samuel chuckled softly, "Let them wonder. I know what I see. I see a boy worth standing beside." That night Eli lay awake staring at the roof beams overhead. For the first time in his young life he did not feel unwanted. He felt chosen. The river glistened under the rising sun. Samuel stood with his fishing pole, Eli by his side. They cast their lines together, the water carrying ripples far downstream. Eli broke the silence, his voice certain this time. "Samuel, am I really your family now?" Samuel's gaze lingered on the boy, his heart heavier and lighter all at once. "You've been family since the day you showed up by this river. Blood don't make it, choice does. And I chose you." Eli smiled, a rare true smile spreading across his face. The weight of rejection did not vanish, but it no longer defined him. Here by the river with Samuel he had a place, a name, a belonging. The story of the unwanted boy and the lonely fisherman was no longer about loss. It was about two broken lives meeting in time to build something whole. As the camera of life pulled back, the river shimmered endless and wide, carrying their story forward. And to you, dear listener, if you have followed Eli and Samuel to this moment, do not let their journey end here with silence. Stay with us, be part of more stories that remind us of hope and healing. Subscribe now and walk with us into the next tale.